This week on Viewpoints.
A group of whites ended up dragging him to death behind an automobile right in downtown Tulsa.
We go back 100 years to the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Then,
we help you think through things like how to personalize your plan. Think about things like recipes that you want to make sure get passed down from generation to generation.
We cover the basic ins and outs of end-of-life planning. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
For almost 70 years, a horrific event in American history was barely mentioned. It was left out of textbooks, classrooms, and public memory. In 1921, a thriving black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was destroyed in one of the deadliest acts of racial violence in U.S. history. The Tulsa Massacre began on the evening of May 31, 1921. At the time, the city had a population of around 100,000 people. However, the destruction centered around a predominantly African-American area called the Greenwood District. In the end, 35 square blocks and around 1,200 homes were reduced to ashes. White mobs looted and burnt down businesses and systematically murdered African-American residents in cold blood.
We know that white members of the mob prevented doctors or ambulance crews from attending to black victims laying in the street. We know that some were repeatedly stabbed, wounded ones stabbed by whites with knives. There were drive-by shootings that happened during the night of May 31st, June 1st, where whites will pile into automobiles and go racing down streets in the black residential neighborhoods, firing into living rooms and children's bedrooms.
That's Scott Ellsworth, a historian and lecturer in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He's originally from Tulsa and has studied the Tulsa Race Massacre for several decades. He takes us back to 1921 to a neighborhood in Tulsa called Greenwood that was home to about 10,000 African Americans. It was a vibrant and fast-growing area that had a bustling commercial district filled with movie theaters, nice restaurants, and community buildings. For many, it was a great place to find a good job and lay down some roots. But beneath all of the economic prosperity and growth, tensions simmered. Ellsworth said that in 1907, state segregation laws stripped African Americans of the right to vote, serve on juries, or become police officers. Whites and African Americans still had entirely separate schools, living areas, and public buildings. Nationwide, groups like the Ku Klux Klan also continued to grow in membership.
It's important to remember that in 1915, the Ku Klux Klan had its second birth, its second iteration. And unlike the Klan of the 1860s and 1870s, this new World War I era Klan was a national organization, and it wielded great power throughout the country. It ran the state government in New Jersey, in Oregon, and Indiana. The Klan was not simply anti-African American, it was also anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic as well, too. What we don't know for sure is whether the Klan was organized in Tulsa before the 1921 massacre or not. There were Klan-like groups in the city. There was one called the Knights of Liberty. We know that was there. We know when organizers for the Klan came to Oklahoma, but we're not exactly sure when the Klan took root. But after the massacre, they were gigantic.
So what sparked the all-out massacre in Tulsa? Ellsworth points to the events surrounding 19-year-old Dick Rowland, an African-American teen in Tulsa who worked as a shoe shiner. Rowland was accused of attempting to sexually assault a young white woman named Sarah Page. She was an elevator operator in a building, and he crossed paths with her on his way to use the colored bathroom on the top floor.
What we know happened is that Dick Rowland walked into the elevator, something happened, Sarah Page screamed, Dick Rowland ran out. And that's all we really know. What we think happened is that Dick Rowland tripped as he entered the elevator, stuck his hands out, might have grabbed Sarah Page's shoulder, knocked into her, perhaps her dress was torn. She screamed, and he took off. The police were summoned. 2 police officers show up. They don't seem to be particularly worried. They don't put out an all-points bulletin They don't rush to go arrest Dick Rowland. They take a couple of statements, and they go about their business. But there was a clerk in the Renberg's clothing store in that building, a white clerk, who had heard the scream, saw Dick Rowland run out, and he concluded that Rowland had attempted to rape Page.
The next morning, Rowland was arrested and put in a jail cell on the top floor of the Tulsa courthouse. However, by the afternoon, Ellsworth says that the predominantly white newspaper at the time, the Tulsa Tribune, published a front-page story portraying Rowland as a stalker and rapist. The article riled up hundreds of people, and by early evening an angry mob had formed outside the courthouse, calling for the lynching of Rowland. But the new sheriff in town was determined to protect the teen.
In Greenwood, meanwhile, we have to remember this is before there were cell phones and computers, even radios didn't exist. So a lot of the news travels by word of mouth. Not that many people had telephones. But word hits Greenwood that Dick Rowland has been arrested, that he's in the jail, and that a lynch mob is forming. And an African-American vet jumped onto the stage at the Dreamland Theater, Black Theater in Greenwood, and said, "Shut this place down. We're not going to let this happen here."
In an effort to help out the sheriff, a group of African-American World War I vets traveled down to the courthouse, but their presence only added fuel to the fire. By nightfall, tensions were high, with hundreds of whites armed with guns, until a shot rang out at the city courthouse and violence erupted. By dawn, the mob arrived at the Greenwood district.
Any blacks who resist are killed. Others are basically arrested and taken away under armed guard to these various internment camps, which prevented them from being able to protect their homes. And so whites would break in, loot stores and homes and businesses, haul out whatever they wanted to, and then they would set them on fire. Perhaps the last death of the massacre, there was a man, we don't know his name. He was a double amputee African-American. We think he lived in a white neighborhood, actually. And he made his living selling pencils downtown and also singing songs and begging for tips. And so he shows up on June 1st, I think, not knowing that the massacre is going on. And a group of whites ended up dragging him to death behind an automobile right in downtown Tulsa.
By the afternoon of June 1st, it's estimated that somewhere between 70 to 300 people were dead, most of the victims being African American. The entire Greenwood community was destroyed, while the white mob went home. Meanwhile, a cover-up began to destroy photo evidence of the event and maintain the city's image.
The white city fathers told the world that white Tulsa is ashamed of this, that they'll rebuild the community. Instead, they tried to steal the land where the black commercial district was so they could build a new railroad station there. They were defeated in court by black lawyers, and black Tulsans rebuilt anyway, but they rebuilt themselves. A grand jury was impaneled, all white, of course, and not surprisingly, the grand jury came out and blamed African Americans for the riot. And so what happened is that no whites spent a single day in jail or prison for any of the murders, the looting, or the arson.
In the years after, white extremist groups like the Ku Klux Klan only grew their reach in Tulsa and the state of Oklahoma.
The Klan in Tulsa built its own impressive brick auditorium. It was a city where they had two chapters of the Women's Klan Auxiliary. It was also one of the few cities in the country that had a Children of the Ku Klux Klan chapter. They had large parades. They had a huge presence on the police force and in the city government as well, too. For nearly 50 years, Tulsa's white city newspapers, white daily newspapers, The World and the Tribune, simply would not write about the massacre and went to great lengths not to do so. Whites moving to Tulsa were told early on this is not something that you're supposed to talk about.
Ellsworth says that the suppression of photo evidence and newspaper stories helped keep the Tulsa Race Massacre out of public view for decades. Today, historians like Ellsworth are working to document the many narratives that were lost and spread awareness about this event and its lasting implications. To learn more about this story and our guest, Scott Ellsworth, head to viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written by Amirah Zaveri and originally aired in February 2021. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.
Coming up, About 60% of Americans don't yet have a written will in place when Viewpoints returns. Death may be a morbid topic of discussion, but it is an eventual certainty for each and every person. You may not know exactly when or how death will come, but that's all the more reason why it's essential to get your affairs in order, no matter how old you are. Abby Schneiderman sees the consequences of not planning ahead firsthand. She works in the field of life and estate planning and is all too familiar with the mess that's created when a person dies and there are no set directives in place. Schneiderman is the co-CEO of Ever Plans and the co-author of the book, In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, How to Organize Your Life Now for When You're Not Around Later.
We hear stories all the time from people who were left to deal with the fact that their spouse had made no plan, or they had made plans, they had a life insurance policy, but had never told their spouse about it, that they didn't do a will. And, now the family is left searching and searching and searching for one just to find out that there was never one in the first place. When you don't plan, you leave a lot to chance. You leave a huge amount of stress and anxiety and decision-making for the people who are left behind, and potentially a lot of fighting. And it creates just an unnecessary burden that doesn't need to be there.
It's estimated that in the U.S., around 60% of people do not have a will in place, according to the American Association of Retired Persons, or AARP. This lack of direction can create a months or years-long mess for family members to sift through, sometimes leading to bitter court battles and permanent rifts.
It really is important to sit down way ahead of time, think through all of the different aspects of your life that would need to get communicated to somebody else in the event of an emergency. What are your wishes? What are your healthcare wishes? If something happens to you, who should be making decisions on your behalf? What kinds of decisions do you need made? Make sure that people know those decisions ahead of time, and all sorts of other decisions that we help you think through in this book, so that in the event of an emergency, your family is not left thinking what you might have wanted. They know what you would have wanted.
It's never too early to put a medical directive and will in place. Schneiderman notes that if this past year has taught people anything, it's that life is full of the unexpected and can take a sudden turn at any moment.
The whole world was sort of hit by a bus in the form of a pandemic. And everybody, knows now that we just don't know what's going to happen next. And it's really, really important that you plan ahead so that in the event that something does happen, in the event that your family needs access to critical information, even practical information, that they have access to it.
A will is a legal document that lays out the individual or people your assets will be distributed to after your death. This can include any property, cars, mementos, and more. It's also critical to have your medical wishes made clear ahead of time in the event that you're incapacitated and can't communicate. Should you be resuscitated? Do you want to be on life support for an extended time? These are important questions that are difficult to think about, but necessary. In addition, it's helpful to create an easy-to-access list of the people that should be contacted in the event of an emergency.
We get you thinking about things like, who are the important people in your life? Are there any specific people that would need to be contacted in the event of an emergency? Healthcare providers, people at your office, neighbors, friends. Who are those people in your life? And just make sure there's a list of that somewhere.
Beyond the traditional preparation of a will or medical directive, it's important to also think about your digital footprint. Who would be in charge of getting into your social media accounts? Should they be deleted within a certain time frame?
If you're somebody who has an account, whether it's hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or tens of dollars, just make sure your family or somebody in your life knows what you would want to have done with that account in the event that something happens to you. The average person today has over 130 online accounts. That includes everything, all their different online accounts. And it's supposed to go up to 200, I believe, this year. And so if you think about that, yes, social media accounts You have to just think about all the different types of accounts that you have. And each one of those, by the way, requires either an email, a username or password. And first of all, make sure that you're keeping track of those accounts somewhere safe. We highly recommend using a password manager. Our favorites are companies like Dashlane or LastPass. I use both of those personally. But when we say digital assets, we're talking about everything, including hardware and software. And this includes your phone, computer, or tablet, as well as everything else online or in the cloud.
It can be overwhelming to go through the many accounts and passwords we amass online, but it's better to spend the time now so that your loved ones have all of the info they need and a clear set of instructions in front of them to carry out your final wishes. Does your partner or a close family member have the passcode to your phone? Or the login for your email and bank accounts?
We're trying to get people thinking about what are the practical things that are in your own head or that you're the one who deals with in your household, that if, God forbid, something were to happen to you, that your family would be, in a bind without knowing. And so we get you thinking about things like passwords. What are the important passwords to services in your life that somebody needs to know about? Do you have a phone that has an unlock code? What's the unlock code to the phone? What's the unlock code to the computer? Just little things like that can have huge impact. Next is, what are your top financial accounts? Do you have a primary checking account, a primary savings account that somebody needs to know that you have?
Lastly, Schneiderman says to also think about how you would like to be remembered. This can include your final wishes, like the funeral, as well as the little things that you would like to leave behind for loved ones, such as personal tokens or the small joys you yourself enjoyed in life.
We help you think through things like how to personalize your plan, how to think about things like recipes that you want to make sure get passed down from generation to generation, or songs that are important to you, or videos or photos that you want to make sure your family has access to.
People spend a lifetime building assets, interests, and relationships. These days, there's also an entire online footprint that holds valuable info and memories. As important as building a life, it's equally important to preserve and protect this legacy through a legally binding will. To learn more about this topic, our guest, Abby Schneiderman, and find resources for end-of-life planning, head to viewpointsradio.org. To see more behind-the-scenes content and support our show, follow us by searching Viewpoints Radio on Instagram, X, and Facebook. This segment originally aired in April 2021 and was written by our executive producer, Amirah Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
This is Viewpoints Explained. I'm Ebony McMorris. Do you feel like reviews have become less helpful and more suspicious over time? So many products on Amazon seem to have thousands of glowing testimonials. Even on websites for local businesses or small brands, it can feel dizzying and scrolling through review after review, trying to figure out what sounds like it's coming from an actual customer versus a planted comment meant to drive up the average rating. This practice is called astroturfing, and some companies have even been caught red-handed. A big skincare and cosmetic brand, Sunday Riley, recently came under fire after it came out that the company was forcing employees to post reviews online. But many people have argued PR backlash alone isn't just a deterrent to stop companies from astroturfing. To better protect consumers, the Federal Trade Commission just passed a new rule banning the buying and selling of all fake online reviews. Brands or businesses who don't follow this new policy could face up to a $50,000 fee per violation. The new policy also makes it illegal for certain websites to say they have impartial reviews and opinions on products when that's not really the case. This new FTC policy is set to take effect in mid-October, and we're hoping it leads to less time and money wasted on products that didn't live up to the hype. That's Viewpoints Explained for this week. More in a moment.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. Rob Reiner was a filmmaker, actor, producer, screenwriter, and political activist. And when he died recently, there was an outpouring of love and mourning to honor his life and career. His life is better covered elsewhere, with lovely anecdotes from friends and family pouring in. But his directing career really was the stuff of Hollywood legend. He gained fame as an actor on All in the Family in the 1970s. Then in 1984, he directed his first feature, the legendary mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap. After that, he made the often overlooked The Sure Thing, and then embarked on one of the most versatile and impressive directing runs of all time. My favorite of his movies is Stand By Me, which saw Reiner masterfully direct a group of young men to tell a rough around the edges but perfectly touching story about friendship, loss of innocence, and what it means to look back on your childhood years later. The film was adapted from a Stephen King novella. It features one of River Phoenix's finest performances, and it has truly stood the test of time as one of the great coming-of-age films ever made. After that came The Princess Bride, a towering achievement of family fantasy comedy, followed by the rom-com genre-defining When Harry Met Sally. Reiner then directed another King adaptation with Misery, which won Kathy Bates the Oscar for Best Actress, before making A Few Good Men, an adaptation of an Aaron Sorkin play that starred Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, and Demi Moore, and that gave audiences some of the most iconic courtroom scenes ever put on film. That's an impressive list, but those aren't even all the great films from Rob Reiner, who also directed The American President and The Bucket List. Reiner was beloved for being an actor and comedian, but he's also one of the finest directors of his era. He was 78. I'm Evan Rook.
That's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.